Creation, God's Handiwork, Part 3 of 3. Here we have a live frog levitates inside a 32 millimeter, 1.26-inch diameter vertical bore of a bitter solenoid in a magnetic field of about 16 Teslas at the Nijmegen High Field Magnet Laboratory at Radboud University in Netherlands. This says everything is magnetic, diamagnetic levitation. Above, these photographs of water and a frog hovering inside a magnetic, not on board a spacecraft, are the first observations of magnetic levitation of living organisms in a room temperature environment. They are somewhat counterintuitive. How can they levitate? Here we have the droplet of water and a frog levitating inside a vertical bore of a solenoid. Lesson 1. Everything can levitate. It is possible to levitate magnetically every material and every living creature on Earth. Molecular magnetism is always present, although it is very weak and usually remains unnoticed. It might give you the impression that materials around us are mainly non-magnetic, but this is not true. They are all magnetic. We call them diamagnetic. With magnetic fields high enough, you can levitate all diamagnetic materials. At our lab, we develop and build magnets that have a very high magnetic fields. We use it to investigate molecules and materials and show the world a levitating frog. The bitter solenoid. This magnet with a maximum field of 20 Tesla, this is 40,000 times the Earth's magnetic field, consists of two concentric electrical coils. The coils are powered by a 6,000 kilowatt power supply, which is 20 kA 300 volts. Here we see electromagnetic field due to the flow of current, and we see the frog inside this vertical bore of this solenoid. How does the frog fly? To explain, we have to start at the beginning. All matter in the universe consists of small particles called atoms. Each atom contains electrons that circle around the core called nucleus. If you place an atom in a magnetic field or a large piece of a matter containing billions and billions of atoms, electrons doing their circles inside don't like this very much. They change their motion in the opposite direction of the external influence. They create their own magnetic field. The atoms behave as little magnets, magnetic needles pointing in the direction opposite of the magnetic field. There are a few materials, such as iron, whose atoms are a bit crazy and love to be in a magnetic field. Their magnetic needles are oriented in the same direction, but those are exceptions to the general rule. Now, gravity versus magnetic field. Magnets push each other away if you try to bring together their like poles, the two north or two south poles. Similarly, the north pole of the external field will try to push away the north poles of magnetic atoms. Our magnets create a very large magnetic field, about 100 to 1,000 times larger than a household magnet. In this field, all the atoms inside the frog act as very small magnets, creating a small field. You may say that the frog is now built up of these tiny magnets, all of which are repelled by the large magnet. The force called diamagnetic force, which is directed upwards, appears to be strong enough to compensate the force of gravity directed downwards that also acts on every single atom of the frog. So, the frog's atoms do not feel any force at all, and the frog floats as if it were in a spacecraft. The small frog looked comfortable inside the magnet and afterwards happily joined its fellow frogs in a biology department. We want a more solid explanation. The one with formulas can be found elsewhere, not below. Why did we use a frog? Well, the levitation of diamagnetic material was first demonstrated in 1939 when small beads of graphite and bismuth were levitated in an electromagnet. It took scientists another 50 years to rediscover levitation when physicists from Grenoble lifted several organic materials by the diamagnetic force. When we in turn rediscovered levitation, Being aware of the previous experiments with levitation, water, we were amazed to find that out of 90% of our colleagues did not believe that water can levitate. We wanted to make people aware of this phenomenon. We levitated a live frog and other not very scientific objects such as various plants, frogs, fish, and a mouse because of their obvious appeal to a broader audience, and in the hope that researchers from various disciplines, not only physicists, would never ever forget this often neglected force and the opportunities it offers. What else can you do with diamagnetism? Diamagnetic levitation differs from any other known way of levitating or floating things. The gravitational force is compensated on the level of individual atoms and molecules. This is, in fact, as close as we can possibly ever approach the science fiction anti-gravity machine. Now, this work was done at the Nijmegen Research Laboratory at the Radboud University in Nijmegen, Netherlands, is the best general traditional university in the Netherlands. Okay, so can we say that gravity is magnetism or magnetic in nature? What keeps the atom together and what keeps it from flying apart? Notice that a proton has a positive field, an electron a negative electric field. Opposite fields attract and like fields repel. The negative and the positive fields wants to bring the electron and proton together. So what keeps them apart? Notice that a spinning particle would generate magnetic fields. The spin direction, left or right, will determine the polarity, north or south. It's both having poles that are oriented the same direction that wants to keep them apart. Okay, so we see the spin of the electron and the proton determines the north and south poles. And we see the electric current, electric fields, positive and negative, attract each other, but the same, if both the electron and the proton have the same polarity, north and south direction, you will see that they will repel. The dotted lines represent the magnetic fields repelling, because like fields repel and opposite fields attract. So opposite electric fields attract and the similar magnetic field poles repel each other. And so that's what keeps the atom together. In an atom, the electric plus field of the proton and the negative field of an electron attract, and the magnetic fields of the proton and electron repel each other to keep them apart. So we can see the spin of the electron and the spin of the proton will determine the north or south poles. So below, solid lines equal electric fields and the dotted lines equal magnetic fields. And so we see here the spin in one direction determines south or north, and the spin in the other direction will make it the opposite. So here we have the sun's magnetic field and the earth's magnetic fields repel each other. Faraday's law of induction describes how an electric current produces a magnetic field, and conversely how a changing magnetic field generates an electric current in a conductor. Okay, so what? Notice that the sun and earth have a spin, and they both have an electric and magnetic fields. They both have north and south poles. So what am I getting at? I'm saying that the solar system operates on the same principle as an atom does. Why don't the astronomers tell us this? Answer: because it will look like this universe is too organized and evolution is a farce. Question: what causes the planets to orbit the sun and all the planets and sun to spin on its axis? Well, God made it that way. Scientists can't give you the answer for that. So we see here the sun, when it spins, creates a north and south pole, as the earth, when it spins, creates a north and south pole, and we have magnetic fields that are similar that repel each other. Now, primary colors. Are there really two sets of primary colors? One for pigments and one for light? Here we have primary colors for pigments. They subtract, called subtraction, red, yellow, and blue. But in the primary colors of light, we have addition, and we have red, blue, and green. Now, is this chart correct? And the answer is no. There are only three types of color cones in the retina at the back of the eye that receives light. We don't have red, blue, yellow, and green cones in the retina of the eye. Only 3 types of cones for color vision. So what are the 3 color cones of the eye? We don't have 4, we have only 3. Does it matter whether light is coming from a pigment or light source? To the eye, light is light no matter where it comes from. Something has to be wrong here in how they have determined the primary colors for pigments and light, because there can only be 3 primary colors for light concerning the cones of our eyes. You see, it's our brain that makes color. So I believe the primary colors for pigments and light are the same. Let's look at the colors of the rainbow. Notice the 3 primary colors in the rainbow are red, yellow, and blue. Let's go over this. There's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Okay, these are the colors that we can see in the rainbow. Notice the primary colors, red and blue. What does red and blue, when you mix it, you get violet. Now, when you mix blue and yellow, you get green. You see, green is between yellow and blue. And what's between green and blue? You don't find yellow. You notice, between blue and yellow, we have green. Between red and blue, you get violet. This goes in a circle. Notice, between the colors of yellow and red is the secondary color orange. Between the colors red and blue is the secondary color violet. And between blue and yellow is the color green. Do you find yellow between green and blue? Answer no. Don't you think that's odd? Notice the basic colors of this rainbow are from bottom up: violet, blue, cyan, green, yellow, orange, red, magenta, violet. I decided to do a small experiment using food dyes. I mixed blue and yellow dyes in water, which resulted in green. Then I shined a bright white flashlight through the green colored water and got a green light. I did another experiment and filled a glass jar with yellow dye in water and added a smaller jar of blue colored water into the yellow colored water and shined a flashlight through that and got a green light coming out on the opposite side. Think about this. How does one get green light? Answer: by shining a light through a green colored glass or plastic material. They must use pigments of blue and yellow to make green lenses or green glass bulb. So the next time you see a green light, ask yourself this question: what pigments did they use to make it green? You understand? You got to use pigments to make something green. A spotlight filter. How do you think they made a spotlight filter green? They have to use pigments. Here we have a blue pigmented lens and a yellow pigmented lens. You put it together, shine a light through it, you get green. See, these, what do you think these are? These are stoplight lenses. And here we see green. Now, today they use LEDs, but before that, they used these lenses. So how did they get this green? They had to combine blue and yellow. Notice that as you mix yellow paint into blue, you will get green. Notice that green is a secondary color. You can see in the green that it is made up of yellow and blue. You can see that in a rainbow, the yellow and blue in the green. See the yellow and blue in the green? You can see it's a secondary color. Notice that light green tends to look more yellow and dark green tends to look more blue. The traffic light below tends to look bluish green, seems to have less yellow in it. Notice at traffic stops, a lot of green lights tend to look blue-green. So you see here, the darker the green, more blue it looks. The lighter the green, the more yellow it looks. When you see blue paint, you are seeing blue light waves coming to your eyes. And when you see yellow paint, you are seeing yellow light coming to your eyes. Now, when you mix blue and yellow paint together, you will see green because your brain sees this combination of yellow and blue waves together are green. Now, does your brain have to figure out whether light is coming from a pigment or a source of light? For instance, is blue light wave from a pigment any different from a source of light of the same wavelength? In other words, does your brain distinguish color of the same wavelength depending on its source? All colors are the result of the mixture of only three wavelengths of visible light that make the millions of colors that we see. It's your brain that translates visible light waves into all the colors that you see. What you see all happens inside your head. Do you get that? So let's get an understanding of what's going on here. When it comes to primary, secondary, and tertiary colors of pigments and light, they are the same. It's when you start to mix the three primary colors of pigments is where you will notice the differences. The three colors then cancel each other out. Red pigment cancels out the yellow and blue light. Yellow pigment cancels out the red and the blue, and blue pigment cancels out the yellow and the red. What you have left is a funky black or a muddy dark brown. Dark brown. You see that pigments are not perfect in canceling all the colors out. They let a little light of each color through, and you get this muddy looking dark reddish brownish black color. As you can see here, you mix three color paints together and you're not going to get perfect black. So what do we learn from this? You can't believe everything in textbooks. You have to think for yourself and analyze what is being said. In one sense, understand that you must think about what is being said and verify it, if you can, of what is being taught. It's like evolution. It makes no sense if you seriously think about it. So how do they make true black paint or printer's ink? They have to use something that's truly black, like charcoal, or something with a jet black pigment into the paint or ink medium. Okay, you can't get jet black from mixing colors. Now, Samsung's dot monitors use yellow with a tint of blue. Now, what happens when you combine blue and mostly yellow light together? I believe you will get green. So you see, they're using basically yellow and blue to get a good green. And yellow will give a nice bright yellow light. Now here we have blue and yellow. And you shine a white light on it and you'll get green. Okay, of the three primary colors, which color, red, yellow, or blue, is closest to the color white? If you were to use crayons, colored pencils, or watercolors to draw a sun or color a sun, what color would you choose? You'd choose yellow, wouldn't you? It's our brains that turn the three wavelengths, red, yellow, and blue, of light combinations into millions of colors, or just black and white. Yes, your three wavelengths of light that our brains translate into red, yellow, and blue to make all the other colors that we see. Okay, so there are people who are colorblind. They can't see the nice reds and the greens. Some people, so think about it. It's our brains that determine the colors that we see. A dog can't see all the colors of a human being. So does a cat and the honeybee. They can see into the ultraviolet, which we can't. Can we call the brain a machine? What type of machine in particular? Answer: a supercomputer. There are 100 billion neurons in the adult human brain, and each neuron makes something like 1,000 to 10,000 connections with other neurons in the brain. Based on this, people have calculated that the number of permutations and combinations of the brain activity exceeds the number of elementary particles in the universe. This is by a neuroscientist, Ramachandran. Do you know that like any other electronic device that the brain has transistors? A transistor is a conductor device that's used to amplify or switch electrical signals and power. The transistor is one of the basic building blocks of modern electronics. So what acts like a transistor in the brain? Answer: the synapses. The brain is also dynamic, not static. The neural pathways of the brain are always changing. Old circuits die out and new circuits form when you are learning something or doing something new. Dynamic brain and neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. Neuroplasticity can be viewed as a general umbrella term that refers to the brain's ability to modify, change, and adapt both structure and function throughout life and in response to experience. Neurogenesis. Adult neurogenesis is the process in which neurons are generated from neural stem cells in the adult. Here we have right cities viewed on the right. Here we have cities viewed from space next to neurons on the right side. So here's cities and a neuron, city and a neuron, city and a neuron, city and a neuron, city and a neuron. You can see they're very similar. Below on the left here, neuron cones form, and you see the growth of these neurons. Here we have neuroscientists can't explain how the brain is able to map out the circuits of where to go, but here we see the growth of the nerves. Natural laws of nature and the universe. An understanding of what is law concerning God's physical universe. Here's one general definition that I like. Law. Enforceable by established law. Science. Definition of laws. It says, in general, a scientific law is the description of an observed phenomenon. It doesn't explain why the phenomenon exists or what causes it. Newton's law of motion in physics. Law 1. A body at rest will remain at rest, and a body in motion will remain in motion unless it is acted upon by an external force. Law 2. The force acting on an object is equal to the mass of that object times its acceleration. F equal ma. Law 3. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. What is Boyle's law? Boyle's law is one of the laws of physics that concern the behavior of gases. At constant temperature, it relates pressure and volume. When a gas is under pressure, it takes up less space. The higher the pressure, the smaller the volume. The law states that pressure is inversely proportional to the volume. Now, God, who created the universe, established laws to govern the behavior of physical matter, otherwise nothing could exist. In general, physical laws direct and restrict the behavior of all matter. God's laws set the parameters or limits by which something behaves or operates. Laws determine the criteria of how matter will exist in this universe. Here is an example of a law no one can explain. Why does light travel at approximately 186,000 miles per second? Why did God create light to go that fast? Answer: no one knows why. However, know this for a fact, that God has a reason for establishing that law for light. God never does anything arbitrarily. But God set that law. You have to understand that. Without laws, you couldn't exist or function. One couldn't do anything like build or manufacture things. Emphasis here: nothing can exist without law in place. Law brings order and existence. For instance, think about this. If the law kept changing all the time, how could anything exist? First law of thermodynamics: energy can neither be created or destroyed. Now, quantum mechanics doesn't observe this. Second law: all things tend toward disorder. More specifically, the second law of thermodynamics states that as one goes forward in time, the net entropy, degree of disorder, of any isolated or closed system will always increase or at least stay the same. Based on the two laws of thermodynamics, the Big Bang theory of evolution is an impossibility. So you can't have something becoming more and more organized over time or appearing from nothing, which is an impossibility to begin with. Hey, but when you believe in lies, you are free to think as stupidly as you want. Note, one place stated that the first law, energy can be altered. Energy and light and electromagnetic wave are synonymous. Altering a light wave is an impossibility. What are God's laws concerning the universe of matter? They are commands God has set in place by his omnipotent power. In other words, it's all supernatural. So is creation of all matter. So is the creation of all matter. Think about it. Everything in the universe is of a supernatural origin. We live in a supernatural universe. You are of a supernatural origin. And we can see here how the universe and the human brain, the nerves of the human brain are very much alike. Size comparisons. For reference, the diameter of the moon is 3,475 kilometers. Let's suppose a careless astronaut dropped a penny on the surface of the moon. The size of that penny compared to the moon is about the same as the size of a hydrogen atom compared to a penny. Okay, so so the size of a penny compared to the moon is what the atom nucleus is compared to the size of the atom. Or here we have a stadium and blueberries comparison of the nucleus compared to the atom. Okay, properties of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Here we have an electron cloud. Okay, but it says here the relative mass of the electron is 1/1840th of a proton. If a proton is considered one, so is a neutron. Centrifugal force and direction. Imagine tying a ball to the end of a string and twirling it in a circle around your head, over your head. The string exerts the centrifugal force on the ball to move it in a circle. The direction of the centrifugal force changes as the object moves around you. Notice that if you tie a weighted object to a string and swing it around in a circle, the centrifugal force and angular momentum tend to keep it in a certain orbit. It takes a force to get it into another orbit. In physics, the angular momentum of an object rotating around some reference point is the measure of the extent to which the object will continue to rotate about the point unless acted upon by an external torque. Here we have a gyroscope, remains upright and while spinning due to the angular momentum. Here again, I have to disagree. Our solar system, I believe, is a model of an atom. Do you see the Earth as it orbits the sun changing its orbit every year? It all has to do with centrifugal force and angular momentum that keep the electrons and the planets in its orbits. The electron cloud. The electron cloud model uses basic idea of Bohr's model, except that the electrons are not found in its distinct orbit, but their position can be thought of as in a cloud that has particular energy. Things scientists don't know about the atom. Do scientists know how to make a proton or electron out of energy? Have you ever really broken a proton or electron apart? Overcoming the strong force. They offer no proof they have done that, although they make that claim. All they can give you for proof is that by using the atomic smasher, it resulted in all these strange named made-up particles. What they did was probably take a large, unstable uranium atom and blast it with a proton. They don't seem to know how energy can be a wave and particle-like at the same time. They definitely don't know what energy actually looks like. They don't know how to put the electron and proton together to make a neutron. They don't know how to assemble an atom, even if they had all the particles. What scientists don't know continued. They don't know what holds the electron and proton together. It's God's power. They say gluons. That's just made up. No such thing exists. Can scientists tell you why or how the atom the element has physical and chemical properties? Why is it that when the electrons and protons change, the physical and chemical properties change? And why and the whys and hows, when you combine different elements, you get totally different properties. Example, take two gases, hydrogen and oxygen, combine them and you get H2O, water, a totally different substance from gases. Take sodium, Na, a highly alkali metal, and chlorine, Cl, a toxic gas, combine them and you get NaCl equals common table salt. Can they tell you why you get that? How do you get those different properties? What scientists don't know continued. Scientists can explain why water is the only substance when it freezes expands. No other substance does that. And this tells you why water expands when it freezes. It forms a lattice or crystalline lattice structure. And why does ice float on water? Well, because of this expansion, I guess it makes it lighter. Why God made ice to float? Because solid water is less dense. Ice floats on the surface of a lake in winter and insulates the water below from freezing, providing a vital benefit to aquatic organisms. Otherwise, everything would die. What scientists don't know. Can they tell you if an electron is made up of light energy Why the negative electric field predominates over the magnetic field? Where is its positive field? The same goes for the proton. Why does it have a positive field that predominates over the magnetic field? Where is the negative field, electric field? And why is it that when the electron and proton spin one way, you get the north and the south poles of the particle going one way, and when it spins the opposite direction, it gets reversed? Because they don't have real answers. They have their made up quantum mechanics theories about what the particles of the atoms are made of. However, there's one thing we can figure out for ourselves, is that since the electron and proton both have an electric and magnetic component to them, both are made up of light energy, electromagnetic waves, which prove that E equal mc squared. Landmark: electrons act like waves. Davidson and Germer showed in 1927 that electrons scatter from a crystal the way X-rays do, proving that particles of matter act like waves. Now, the question is to ask is, why does electron behave at times like a wave? Answer is simply because all particles of an atom are made up of wave-like particles of energy, equal mc squared. You must understand that energy is always moving. You will notice also, no matter how cold it gets, the atom never stops moving. Okay, now this is a good example of how the electron and protons might possibly behave. It's like a wave. It's moving around. So, what have we learned so far? We know that the electromagnetic wave is a vibration of energy from God's voice. We also just learned that the electron behaves as a wave because it's made up of vibrating light energy. Then can we say that the proton also behaves like a wave? Definitely. The proton is a lot larger than an electron, over 1,800 times bigger. Think about the electron and the proton in a mild drunken state. It tries to go all over the place together. It's not stable like the Earth. It's like the Earth and Sun moving erratically. So the electron, proton, who are both, so the electron and proton, who are both not quite in sync, will result in this cloud. The electron and proton are fluctuating in their wave patterns. See, like this squirrel? Okay, the photograph shows the same electron orbit. The first time we have ever been able to observe the wave function of the atom. See, wave function. To capture this image, scientists use a quantum microscope, a device capable of seeing into quantum realm. See, if you were to try to plot this, what do you get? You'd get this same result. God made the great universe out of machines. I was thinking, now, is a rock inanimate? Yes, yet it's made of molecules of atoms. And we can say all inanimate objects God created are made of machines. Now, wait a second. What about granite and basalt rocks? They are made up of Earth's crust. Are they machines? Do they have structure and functional properties? Yes, they do. How about magma, lava? Can they be considered machines? They have functional properties, such as making new land. It's part of Earth's structure. There are types of crust, by the way, continental and oceanic. Now, magma is molten rock below the Earth's surface, and lava is molten rock above. Let's back up a second. Foundational rocks of the Earth's crust have structure and motion and function, but they don't move or need energy to function. So it's kind of iffy to call it a machine. Yet, we have to agree they are composed of machines. Nevertheless, the moon is a machine. It rotates and orbits the Earth. It provides reflected light from the sun at times. It affects the tides. It seems to have a 28-day cycle of phases of the moon. Some say the phases of the moon affects the growing of plants. Think about this. What was the moon like when it had a perfectly even surface before the flood? I have heard it said that it was at the beginning of the flood when the Earth's crust burst at its seams and shot out water with tremendous force, along with huge boulders that caused the craters of the moon. And there were hypercanes, huge hurricanes caused by very warm waters created by all the volcanic activity during the flood. Is water a machine? It has a fluid structure and many functional properties, such as it hydrates. It's a universal solvent. It keeps things clean. Can we consider it? Well, can we consider ice a machine? Yes. How about rivers, lakes, oceans? Are they machines? They support life and provide drinking water. How about clouds? Clouds provide rain, hail, snow, shade, and lightning. How about the air? It provides oxygen to breathe. Can wind be considered a machine, which is moving air? How about atoms, like tornadoes and hurricanes? They have structure and functional properties, although not necessarily good. Here we have a fire hurricane. How about this earth as a whole? Can that be considered a machine? Definitely. How about the sun, which provides heat and light? Definitely. Okay, how about the solar system? Is that a machine? Yes, a machine motor. Then how about the galaxies? They are also machine motors. Well, now, how about this universe? It's a giant machine motor that revolves around God's throne. So, let's consider all of the 2 trillion, a guess, of galaxies, each of which has from 1 to 2 billion stars. 99.99% of this universe is plasma, almost 100%. All of the energy comes from God. God created every single galaxy, with their stars. Can you imagine how much power it took to create this universe? God's power is infinite, without limit. Everything that is made of plasma is made of energy, and energy is an electromagnetic wave of light. There is no difference between waves in the electromagnetic spectrum of light except for the wavelength and frequency. In other words, gamma rays and X-rays are as much light waves as radio waves. It all has the same makeup. I read once long ago that visible light makes up only 1/10,000th of 1% of the entire spectrum of light. Think about this. Visible light makes up less than 1% of the light spectrum. As you have learned, there are only 3 colors that make up all the colors that we see. You see, it's the different combinations of these colored wavelengths that produce all the colors that we see. We can't really see these wavelengths. It's our brains that produce color and vision from only 3 wavelengths of the entire spectrum of electromagnetic waves. What important fact have we learned about light? We know for a fact that light is made up of only 3 colors because we have only 3 cones for color in the retina of our eyes. These colors are red, yellow, and blue. So how do we get the other colors? From the combination and intensity of wavelengths of light coming from that source of light. Now, who made our eyes? God did. Can you understand that your eyes are a machine, a sensor to detect light rays? I see light as existing as only in 3 wavelengths frequencies of light. What they are, I am not exactly sure, since the wavelengths for each color varies depending on the chart or individual chart itself. Okay, for argument's sake, let me give 1 wavelength for each of the 3 colors of light. Let's say blue is 480 nanometers, yellow 580 nanometers, and red 680 nanometers. Now, God has set these wavelengths and frequencies by law, so it would always be the same. It never changes. This means all the other frequencies of the entire spectrum are fixed. Take radio waves, for instance. There's only a fixed number of stations because there is a fixed number of radio frequencies. Think about this. The number of electromagnetic waves of the entire electromagnetic spectrum is fixed. You will notice that the entire electromagnetic spectrum is divided up into categories. It's man who has arbitrarily named and grouped each category of waves for easy designation. Notice that each category is limited to a certain range of wavelengths and frequencies of certain sizes. Example, visible light is found between the wavelengths of roughly 400 nanometers to 800 nanometers. Yet, there's only 3 colors that make up all the other colors. Remember, our brains make up all other colors from only 3 wavelengths of light. Color is manufactured in the brain, about 1 million colors. There is no clear distinction between one category to the next because they both can be considered either or depending on the circumstances. Now, I cut this out from the bottom of this chart because I didn't have room. What does it say? The radiation behind radios, visible light, and nuclear blasts is exactly the same thing, just with different amounts of energy. Now, here is where I differ. Hold on a second. Is this statement true that I cut off of the last chart correct? Let's consider gamma rays, the shortest wavelength frequencies on one side of the chart, and radio waves, the largest waves, on the opposite side of the chart. Notice it's a continuum from one side to the other. Now this is where it differs. It says just with different amounts of energy. Is that true? Okay, the amount of potency is proportional to the wavelength versus frequency. As wavelength decreases, frequency increases. It gets more potent or more damaging. As the wavelength increases, it becomes less potent and frequency decreases. So do radio waves have less energy than gamma rays? I don't think so. Radio waves have the longest wavelengths in the electromagnetic spectrum, according to NASA, ranging from about 0.04 inches, 1 millimeter, to more than 62 miles long. Gamma rays fall in the range of the electromagnetic spectrum above soft X-rays. Gamma rays have frequency greater than about 10 to the 19th cycles per second, or hertz, and wavelengths of less than 100 picometers, or 4 times 10 to the 9th inches. A picometer is 1 trillionth of a meter. Let me give you an example of what I am talking about. Let's take a cup of some pure liquid oxygen and dispense it into a closed room and light a match. What would happen? Nothing much. The match would normally burn as usual. Now let's take that same cup of pure liquid nitrogen and light that on fire. What would happen? There would be a very intense fire. Would you agree? As on the right here. Do you see? It's the concentration of the oxygen that determines its potency. So a gamma ray have a very short wavelength and a high frequency that makes it more potent as compared to a radio wave, which has a very long wavelength and low frequency. The amount of energy hasn't changed. It's the concentration of energy that's changed. Summation. What determines potency? Wavelength and frequency of a wave. Notice that as wavelength decreases, frequency increases, and as wavelength increases, frequency decreases. So what have we learned? Potency is determined by wavelength and frequency. Gamma rays with short wavelengths and high frequencies are more potent than radio waves, which have longer waves and lower frequencies. The amount of energy stays the same. So when you concentrate most anything, it becomes more potent. Let's take salt, for example. Dilute a teaspoon of salt in a bucket of water versus a cup of water. Which one would be more salty and more potent and more concentrated? Answer the cup. Would you agree? Is visible light energy? That is easy to prove. A laser shows that visible light is energy. You can, with a laser, burn something. You take a laser, it can cut through metal. Laser can shoot down planes. Here we have a gigantic laser on a Boeing 747. As you can see, and what do they do with these lasers on the Boeing 47? It's used to shoot down jet planes, the enemy. As you can see, laser technology has been ongoing with the military for many years. An important fact to remember, energy equals light, and energy equals God's power. Think, what is everything in this physical universe made from? God's power. He is called the all-powerful, omnipotent God because all power comes from Him. You are made from His power. Also, by His power, He sets the laws of the physical universe in place to keep it all together. However, because of sin in this world, they don't keep God's spiritual and physical laws, and everything falls apart. Look at this world. It's full of disease and sickness, and this earth is polluted, air, land, and oceans. Law brings order. No law means chaos and disorder. Nothing could exist unless God holds it together. Now look at how huge the 747 Lockheed military laser is here on the bottom. Now they recently modified it, so it's a little smaller. So what does this prove? Proves light is energy. So here we have the modern 747. It's a newer plane that carries this high-powered lasers, big as a man. You can see, huge. Notice the chart. The electromagnetic wave frequencies are on a continuum of waves from one end of the spectrum to the other. At one end, it's increasing in wavelength, and from the other end, it's decreasing. So you can see, but can you see any gaps between the categories of wavelengths? Can you imagine this spectrum came out of nothing? If you can, you must not be very bright. Or Does this look like this was done by design and engineering? Because all matter is made from electromagnetic waves, light energy are the building blocks of things made out of matter. Can scientists tell where laws of this universe come from? What law says you can get something from nothing and then build itself up to make something more complex? Could you imagine Lego blocks coming out of nothing and forming objects on its own? Why not? Now, can you say that you can't comprehend God? You can't comprehend how exactly He made everything. However, what can you understand? You can't understand your own self. Do you know what is life? Can you explain everything about what's happening right now inside your body? Can you explain consciousness? What is memory? Explain how your brain functions? Hey, you don't understand your own self. Everything God created was by a miracle. Even His natural laws are a miracle. Name me one miracle God did that you can understand and explain. Nevertheless, we see that everything is so complex that we can't fully understand anything that He created, but we can get some idea that what He does create has been done by an infinite being who designed and engineered everything He created. You can understand your own self, and you want to understand God and how He created everything? Does that make any sense? No, it doesn't. So, in conclusion, when you are able to understand everything about yourself and what's going on inside of you at any moment in time, what makes you tick, and what life is, then you'll be able to comprehend God and His works. You are an enigma, mystery to your own self, and you want to understand God. Now, is healthy, fertile organic soil a living machine? Think about all the living organisms, fungus, bacteria, decomposing organic matter, and broken down minerals found in organic soil. Healthy soil is full of biodiversity and ecological system that God has designed, engineered to be that way. That's not by chance. There's different cycles and systems set in place for soil to be fully functional. Could we call a forest a living machine? Everything has been in place to support life. Any ecosystem is a living machine. Hydrothermal vents are very deep under the sea, is an ecosystem that supports life. Is it a living machine? The electric flame scallop inhabits the waters of Indo-Pacific, ranges in size from 1 inch to 3 inches. It's on the opposite page. Okay, here we have the electric flame scallop firing off electricity. Think about this. See the scallop? It fires off an electric current. And we see here various organisms found under the sea, some very strange organisms. Here we see the immortal jellyfish, doesn't seem to ever die. Here we see a plume worm. Here we see a barrelfish. Here we see a vampire squid. We see all these strange creatures. Here's a blobfish. I mean, look at all these strange. Here's a comb jelly. Oh, here's a bobbit. Look at this jaws it has. It has trap jaws to catch fish. And the strange pink fish here. You have more strange creatures. Now we have a dancing scallop here. Here we have a gossamer worm. You know that this thing can swim backwards the same way it swims forward, and the oceanographers, or those that study these things, say that this is the only creature that can do that. Goes one way and then goes exactly the opposite way, the same way it went forward. Now here we have nicknamed the Halloween jellyfish. It sort of looks like Halloween jellyfish, and they don't know what this is here at the top. Here we have the barrel eye fish, and where is its eyes? It's this greenish orbs on top that it sees upwards, and they don't exactly know what it's looking for. Here's a slug, looks like a little bunny. And here is what they call a cockatoo squid. And what this is, I'm not exactly sure. Okay, viruses, not considered living, but they certainly behave like machines, don't they? Scientists are not sure if there are good viruses. It's still a mystery as to what all viruses do to cells they infect. Well, we know that these are dangerous ones here, or most of them. Here we have the Ebola virus. We have tobacco mosaic virus. We have the adenovirus. We have the influenza virus. We have the bacteriophage. We have human immunodeficiency virus. Where did they come from? Okay, Satan is the originator of all perversion, evil, and degeneration of every kind. Now, this is from Ellen G. White, the prophetess to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, Satan is the one who causes mutations, predatory animals, disease, death, thorns, thistles, tears, pathogens, viruses, storms, and evil of all kinds. Guess who inspires people to produce computer viruses? These viral machines are all made by or inspired by Satan. Okay, these are the statements from Ellen G. White, prophetess. When one recovers from disease, it is God who restores him. Sickness, suffering, and death are the work of an antagonistic power. Satan is the destroyer, God the restorer. It is true that all suffering results from the transgression of God's laws, but the fruit had become perverted. Satan, the author, and sin and all its results had led men to look upon disease and death as proceeding from God. So who caused mutations to produce pests like mice, rats, termites, mosquitoes, houseflies, cockroaches, fleas? The God of nature is perpetually at work. His infinite power works unseen, but manifestations appear in the effects which the work produces. The same God who guides the planets works the fruit orchard and in the vegetable garden. He never made a thorn, a thistle, or a tear. These are Satan's work, the result of degeneration or mutation introduced by him among the precious things, but it is through God's immediate agency that every bud bursts into blossom. So guess who made the viruses? He mutated something to make the viruses deadly. Psalms 24, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. In Revelation. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give him the glory, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. Matthew 6, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other. He will be devoted to one and despise the other. 1 John 2:15. Do not love the world, nor the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. James 4:4. Whoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God, because the world works actively to destroy God from this world. How to worship God and give him the glory? Answer, by keeping God's 10 commandments and keeping the seventh-day Sabbath holy, according to the fourth commandment. 1 John 5:3. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome. Deuteronomy 11. See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you obey the commands of the Lord your God, that I am giving you today. The curse if you disobey the commands of the Lord your God. Exodus 20. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord. In it thou shalt not do any work. Thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and hallowed it. In other words, God is saying he is God of the universe. Quotes of notable people on the human body. The human body is an incredible machine, but most people only get out of that machine what their mind allows them to do. Our body is a machine for living. It is organized for that. It is its nature. Let life go on it unhindered, and let it defend itself. God made the human body like a machine with built-in obsolescence. What is man? What a strange union of matter and mind, a machine for converting material into spiritual force. Now here's Benjamin Carson. My strong belief is that God created human beings and therefore he knows about every aspect of the human body. So if I want to fix it, I just need to stay in harmony with him. And of course, you got to know how the body is made up of. Education makes machines which act like men and produces men who act like machines. One machine can do the work of 50 ordinary men. No machine can do the work of one extraordinary man. A quote from Ellen G. White, a prophetess of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. God's voice in his handiwork. Wherever we turn, we hear the voice of God and behold his handiwork. From the solemn roll of the deep-toned thunder and old ocean ceaseless roar to the glad songs that make the forest vocal with melody, nature's 10,000 voices speak his praise. In earth and sea and sky, with their marvelous tint and color, varying in gorgeous contrast or blended in harmony, we behold his glory. The everlasting hills tell of his power, the trees that wave their green banners in the sunlight, and the flowers in their delicate beauty point to their creator. The living green that carpets the brown earth tells of God's care for the humblest of his creatures. The caves of the sea and depths of the earth reveal his treasures. He who placed the pearls in the ocean and the amethyst and chrysolite among the rocks is a lover of the beautiful. The sun in the heavens is a representative of him who is life and light of all that he has made. All the brightness and beauty that adorn the earth and light up the heavens speak of God. From Great Controversy, Book 53.1. A quote from Ellen G. White. Heavenly knowledge will be progressive. All the treasures of the universe will be open to the study of God's redeemed. Unfettered by mortality, they wing their tireless flight to worlds afar, worlds that thrilled with sorrow at the spectacle of human woe and rang with songs of gladness and tidings of the ransomed souls. With unutterable delight, the children of earth enter into the joy and the wisdom of unfallen beings. They share the treasures of knowledge and understanding gained through the ages upon ages in contemplation of God's handiwork. With undimmed vision, they gaze upon the glory of creation, suns and stars and systems, all in their appointed order circling the throne of deity upon all things, from the least to the greatest. The Creator's name is written, and in all are the riches of his power. Yes, we can see it in his engineering and creative power. John 8, engineering and design, John 8, if ye continue in my word, ye are disciples indeed, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Revelation 21. The city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. Millions of worlds are inhabited. Should the inhabitants of this little world refuse obedience to God, he would not be left without glory. He could sweep every mortal from the face of the earth in a moment and create a new race of people to people it and glorify his name. God is not dependent on man for honor. He could marshal the starry host of heaven, the millions of worlds above, to raise a song of honor and praise and glory to his name. Review and Herald, March 1, 1881. Job 1:6. Now, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from whence do you come? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from roaming about the earth and walking around on it. Job 38:4. Where wast thou when I laid the foundation of the earth? Declare, if thou hast understanding. When the morning stars sang together, these are the angels, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. These are the inhabitants from the other worlds. Okay, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Acts 4:12. Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Jonah 2:9. Revelation says, Behold, he cometh with clouds. And in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. The end. Part 3 of 3.